We are just a couple of days from the start of another Eagles football season, and I'm thrilled to talk about that fact again this year with the radio voice of the Philadelphia Eagles, the legendary Merrill Reese. Merrill, welcome back.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be with you.
Merrill, there was some fantastic news regarding you last month. We'll get to that in just a bit, but let's talk about the 2024 Eagles first of all. Lots of new faces on both sides of the ball, including a pretty good running back who spent all of his career up the turnpike previously. What does Saquon Barkley bring to the Birds offense, and how is he going to be utilized?
Well, the thing about Saquon Barkley is you have a complete back. He is a guy who doesn't have to come out on third down. He's a running back who can block, catch, and, of course, destroy enemy defenses with his great running. The only hesitation I have, and it's hopefully doesn't come into play, is that Buddy Ryan once said to me, durability is as important as ability, and he has had a share of injuries in his years with the Giants, but hopefully running behind a much better offensive line, he'll be able to stay out there, and if he stays out there, he's a great back.
Well, between Barkley, a couple of terrific starting receivers, Dallas Goedert at tight end, and now Jahan Dotson added to the mix, how do you keep everybody happy?
By winning. Winning keeps people very, very happy. But I think that Jalen Hurts is going to have a plethora of wonderful receivers, and that's a good sign.
Well, speaking of Jalen Hurts, he was an MVP runner-up in 2022, kind of a subpar 2023. Now, with yet another new offensive coordinator to work with, what are you expecting from Hurts this season?
Well, I think the combination of Kellen Moore with Jalen Hurts is going to bring out the very best in Jalen Hurts. There were a lot of things last year, and as a matter of fact, Nick Sirianni mentioned late in the year or after the year when he was assessing things, that the offense had become somewhat stale. And it was stale, and it was predictable. And after they lost to San Francisco, there was a template out there that showed that you could blitz the Eagles, and they weren't picking up the blitz. And also, they were among the teams in the league with the least amount of motion. Well, motion gives the quarterback a read of what the defense is doing, whether they're in man or whether in the zone. This is going to be a much different and less predictable offense, and I think Jalen Hurts is going to really benefit from it. He's a great young quarterback.
Of course, the offensive line has been good for quite a while, should be good yet again, but is there any concern about the impact of Jason Kelce's retirement on things, not just because he was a great center, but such a great team leader also?
Look, when you lose a Jason Kelce, it's very difficult to replace that entire package that you mentioned. However, they're not just throwing somebody into that position. They're taking Cam Jurgens, who Jason Kelce played a very active role in evaluating before they drafted him. He was involved in the evaluation process of Cam Jurgens, the star at Nebraska. Also, that first summer that he was here, Jason Kelce, he had some surgery that he went through, and Cam Jurgens almost flawlessly stepped in and started at center. And one other thing, instead of just working and waiting in the wings, he was the starting right guard last year. So he's got starting NFL experience. So I think that the addition of Cam Jurgens is going to fill that void very, very well. And again, you're not talking about saying that he's a Hall of Famer going into it, as Jason Kelce turned out to be, or will be one day. But you know that he's very, very good, and he's got a great upside.
As for the defense, new coordinator Vic Fangio has been coaching defenses in the NFL since the mid-1980s. He's an old school guy, but our mutual friend Mark Eckel on our show just the other day told us that Fangio will go with a lot of different defensive schemes, but not a lot of blitzing. What do you expect from Fangio's defense, and especially the D-line, which really has to get more pressure than last year's version did?
Well, I think he's great. I think he's great. He reminds me a little bit of Jim Johnson, who was such a great defensive coordinator for so many years under Andy. But Vic Fangio is bright. He's got the experience. Let's face it, he was a head coach in Denver, and he will do what it takes. I'm not debating, Mark, but if Vic Fangio thinks this personnel group would benefit best by utilizing more blitzes than he's used in the past, he'll do whatever it takes. He will fit his defensive style into what he believes are the best talents of his roster.
Well, Howie went heavy on defensive guys in the draft: Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jalix Hunt, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., of course, and we will likely see all of them on the field during this season. Even with the loss of Fletcher Cox and, Slay and BG getting another year older, the defense has to be better than last year, right?
You would think so. I'm excited about Devin White. Can he be the Devin White who was an All-Pro early in his career at Tampa before injuries set in? But he looks good. I think he's going to add something. I really do. Nakobe Dean, who was a great player at Georgia, has been hampered by injuries. If he's healthy and if he gets the opportunity, and he will, I think that he's a smart player and he will open some eyes. So I think they're going to be pretty good. I really do.
Merrill, the Eagles season, of course, begins Friday in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The Packers providing the opposition. What do you expect from this game? I mean, the Packers are kind of an up-and-coming team. A lot of people think they can win the NFC North, maybe beating out the Lions. What do you expect Friday night?
I expect a great game. I honestly do. I think that the Eagles are the best team in the NFC going into the season. But I think if you were to look at the other teams that could possibly fill that role, that are going to be really, really tough teams that will be competitive all the way through, the Packers are with that group. Maybe the Lions move into that group this year as Minnesota moves farther away. But the Rams are going to be good. The Cowboys are always a problem. But I think that you're going to learn a lot about both of these teams from the get-go, because you take a team like the Eagles where the starters didn't play at all, the offensive starters during the preseason, and see how ready they are. So it's going to be a very revealing opening game for both teams. You're not getting somebody who is a bottom feeder.
What do you think the atmosphere will be like in Sao Paulo? They're used to a different kind of football down there.
I don't know. I don't know what they'll yell or scream or sing or do, but it will be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Merrill, let's talk about that wonderful, well-deserved honor bestowed upon you in early August in Canton, Ohio. But before we talk about that, take us back to June when you got the call. Is it true that you had not been tipped off at all that you might be a recipient of the Pete Rozelle Radio-Television Award prior to that?
Jim, of all the things I thought about in my life, the Pro Football Hall of Fame was something I never considered. I never thought about it. In 2016, when Jeffrey Lurie called me and told me that I was going to be inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame, I was happy. I was excited. But, I figure I've been doing the game 100 years. At some point, they may open the door for me in the Eagles Hall of Fame. But with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, rarely does a radio broadcaster get in. Yeah. Rarely. I think one or two other times, a radio play-by-play guy. It's filled with your network stars. It's filled with network executives, top people, movers and shakers in the sports telecasting business. And I was driving out to play golf, and I looked at the screen in my car, and it said Canton, Ohio. And you know what? I didn't even think Hall of Fame. All I thought was, I don't know anybody in Canton, Ohio. But I answered it. The gentleman said, "Is this Merrill Reese?" I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "This is Jim Porter, president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Are you driving?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You might want to pull over." And I did. And he said, "Congratulations, you are the winner of the 2024 Pete Rozelle Radio and Television Award, and you'll be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame." And I was emotional. It just hit me, and all I could do was talk through the tears and sob. I was just so emotional. And I'm not one of these people who gets emotional about everything. I pick my moments to really feel that kind of sentiment. But boy, did that hit me. And then he told me that they would announce it tomorrow, namely on a Thursday at 11 o'clock. This was a Wednesday, and I could not tell anybody because they didn't want it to get out on social media except my wife.
Yeah.
And I called my wife, and when Cindy answered the phone, again, I got very emotional, and I'm crying, and she said, "Are you okay? Were you in an accident?" And I'm going, "Yeah, oh no, Hall of Fame, So it was a great honor.
Oh, wow. Well, in your induction speech, you did call it the thrill of a lifetime. You mentioned all of your broadcast partners, but you also mentioned Philly radio legend Bill Campbell. Was he one of your role models or sources of inspiration when you were young?
Absolutely. There have been some really, really wonderful broadcasters in this area. There's Harry Callis and Gene Hart. And by some, you go back, this city has had, and they still have a lot of wonderful broadcasters. But to me, when you talk about, if you were to put one on top of Mount Rushmore, it would be Bill Campbell. Because Bill Campbell did the Eagles, and I listened to him growing up. He did the Phillies. He did the Warriors. He did the Sixers. He was one of the best interviewers I ever heard. One of the best. I wrote a book, Sportscasting, Turning Your Passion into a Profession. And when I wanted to do a chapter on interviewing, I sat down with Bill because Bill did some of the most engrossing interviews. He listened to what the subject was saying, and you felt like you were privy to this great conversation with so much substance. He was a masterful interviewer. So I say just because of all the different things he did, he's in the Basketball Hall of Fame. I just think he was the best.
Last thing, Merrill, you said something also in your induction speech that kind of surprised me. I thought you knew pretty much everything about pro football, but you said Dick Vermeil taught you a lot about the game. How so?
Well, from the very early days, Dick was the head coach when I stepped behind the mic to be the play-by-play man. And Dick was always somebody I could talk to. But also in those days, he had an offensive coach named Sid Gilman, who's in the Hall of Fame. Sid Gilman is truly the person, not Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh said in an interview that he was taught the West Coast offense from Sid Gilman. He was one of the most brilliant offensive guys ever. And I would talk to him. I would go into his office to the point where I would drive him nuts, but he never turned me away. And I would sit and talk football with him. And there were defensive players, like coaches like Jim Johnson, who was never too busy, or Wade Phillips, or Buddy Ryan. I had a great relationship. Buddy Ryan would take out video and show it to me. But throughout all these years, there's been one constant, and that is Dick Vermeil, who I am happy to call one of my really close friends. And it is Dick Vermeil who I will call after a game and ask him about what a coach did here, or why the Eagles failed here, or what you can learn from about that opponent. Dick Vermeil is a wealth of knowledge, and every conversation I have with Dick, I come away with something I didn't know before.
You're the best, Merrill. 48 years as the Eagles radio voice, an Eagles Hall of Famer, now a Pro Football Hall of Famer. And for the 10th straight year, you joined us to give us a season preview for the Eagles. We truly appreciate it. Have a great season, Merrill. All the best.
Thank you, Jim. It's always fun speaking with you. And I love this as much as I ever did. The thing I said in the Hall of Fame speech also was every game when they played the national anthem, I look down and I think to myself, there's no place in the world I would rather be, and there's nothing in the world I would rather be doing.